Hello again, welcome back. This video is important to understanding how empires work and pivotal to enabling your movement within them. It delivers a sweeping, historically grounded wake-up call rooted in one of the oldest patterns in human civilization. Using Plato's famous allegory as its central metaphor and opening with Romans 1:25, this video reveals how we remain chained, staring at shadows we have come to worship as reality. The power behind those shadows is not primarily military or political, it is theological. A visible host empire supplies the armies, laws, and public belief systems that sanctify the order, while a deeper, transnational financial layer, the parasite, operates above it, bending doctrine to serve liquidity, coordinating money creation, and, quietly, extracting real wealth. The aim of this video is to trace this exact parasite-host dynamic across thousands of years, spanning from the temple economies of ancient Mesopotamia, Rome's deliberate debasement of the silver denarius, the Chinese, Song and Ming dynasties' paper money hyperinflation, the international banking networks of the Templars, Medicis, Fuggers, and Venetian oligarchies, the Bank of England's fractional reserve model that powered the British Empire, the international financiers who bet on Tsarist Russia before the Bolshevik reset, and today's US dollar system coordinated through the BIS, IMF, World Bank, and central banks. It shows how the post-1989 unipolar moment, Pax Americana, the supremacy of science, turned into a new civil religion, and dollar hegemony was never the end of history. It was simply the latest cycle, now visibly rotting from hubris, over-financialization, and engineered crises. You'll hear how financial collapses are rarely natural boom-bust events, but are deliberately shaped by policy and timing when it becomes more profitable for the financial layer to reposition capital than to keep the old host alive. Current flashpoints, energy disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, military registration drives, and asset bubbles are presented as classic symptoms of the parasite, detaching from a weakening host. Finally, the video offers a clear historical prescription for what actually works when empires fracture. Societies and individuals that survive make the deep shift from efficiency to resilience, from hollow materialism to authentic spirituality, from radical individualism to family and local community, and from gerontocracy to younger, decisive leadership. Backed by references to Sir John Glubb, Ray Dalio, Fernand Braudel, Niall Ferguson, Richard von Glahn, Hassan Malik, and others, the message is consistent and urgent. This is not conspiracy. This is pattern recognition. Once you see the pattern, the daily headlines lose their power to disorient you. The only question that ultimately matters is, where are the lifeboats? A powerful, big-picture meditation on monetary history, empire cycles, theological power structures, and what it takes to stay standing when the current order resets. Welcome to the sovereign cycle. So let's begin. We live inside Plato's cave. We are chained, staring at shadows cast on the wall by puppeteers behind us. We name the shadows. We trade the shadows. We worship the shadows. We mortgage our futures to them. We raise our children inside them. We measure our worth by them, and we call them reality. The puppeteers do not rule by armies or overt force alone. Their power is deeper. It is theological. They shape the sacred stories we tell about value, debt, authority, obligation, sacrifice, and redemption. Debt becomes moral duty. Money becomes something sacred. Inflation becomes something inevitable. Submission becomes natural order. Their authority rests not only on belief in the system, but on belief that the system itself is ordained, beyond question. Blessed by the gods, the mandate of heaven, divine right, historical necessity, or scientific inevitability. This is not abstract philosophy. It is the oldest recurring structure in recorded history. A parasite-host dynamic that directly determines the purchasing power in your wallet, the security of your home, the stability of your job, the cost of feeding your family, and the future your children will inherit. There has always been a visible layer. The host, the empire, its armies, laws, rulers, institutions, and public belief systems that tell ordinary people, this order is right, this order is necessary, this order is permanent. Resistance is sinful, futile, irrational, or backward. And alongside it, there has always been another layer, a deeper shadow culture, a transnational financial layer, the parasite, that operates above, around, and through the host. It bends doctrine to serve liquidity. It coordinates money creation. It arbitrages war, trade, scarcity, and crisis. It quietly extracts real wealth, while the broader population continues to accept the illusion as sacred truth. This is not a moral accusation. It is a structural pattern. It emerges wherever money can be created faster than real output. The pattern begins in the earliest civilizations. In Mesopotamia, the first banking systems were temple systems. Temples were not just places of worship. They were centers of storage, lending, accounting, courts of obligation, and redistribution. Grain and silver were held. Loans were issued at interest. Debts were recorded on clay tablets. And debt was not neutral. It was moral. Cosmic imbalance. Sin itself. Interest was the god's due. To default was to violate sacred order. This mattered in real terms. It determined whether a farmer kept his land or lost it, whether a family survived or fell into servitude, whether a drought became survivable or socially catastrophic. The same sacred logic echoes today in the moralization of debt, the sanctity of repayment, the centrality of interest, and the quiet legal priority given to creditors. The same structure appears in Rome. The silver denarius began nearly pure under Augustus. By the reign of Septimius Severus, it was already heavily debased. By Aurelian, it held less than 5% silver. Kenneth Harl's study of Roman coinage shows how emperors and the financial class used controlled dilution to fund endless wars and public grain doles, all while the imperial cult declared the ruler quasi-divine and stamped his sacred image on every coin. That image mattered. The coin retained trust, not because of metal alone, but because it was sanctified by authority. Temples across the empire doubled as banks, holding deposits under the protection of the gods. Even as Christianity rose, the new faith was gradually folded into imperial legitimacy, providing fresh moral cover. The visible host marched under eagles and then under crosses. The shadow financial layer continued profiting behind altar and throne alike. This mattered to every Roman citizen whose wages bought less, whose bread cost more, whose children inherited a devalued future. The same mechanism is still at work in the currency you use to buy groceries and pay rent. The same pattern appears in imperial China. During the Song dynasty, the world's first true paper money, the jiaozi, was introduced in 1024 AD. At first it offered real advantages: portability, scale, and expanded trade. But the temptation to issue claims faster than underlying production proved irresistible. By the late Song, and again in the Ming dynasty, repeated overissuance triggered hyperinflation, severe enough to wipe out ordinary people. Richard von Glan's The Economic History of China documents how ruling bureaucracies and merchant elites extracted grain, silk, labor, and real resources under the mandate of heaven. The cosmological theology that framed every dynastic extraction as heaven ordained. When the gap between paper promises and physical reality grew too wide, famine and rebellion followed. Yet the financial layer had often already repositioned into land, metals, or external networks. This determined whether a peasant family kept its ancestral plot or lost everything to inflation and debt. The same theological cover now appears in secular form whenever currency debasement is justified as necessary management, while the cost of food, shelter, and family stability silently rises. In medieval and early modern Europe, the fusion became explicit and durable. The Knights Templar, a religious military order sworn to poverty, created one of the first international banking networks using letters of credit under the sacred protection of the church. Theologians carved loopholes around usury bans so the pious could finance kings and crusades. When the Templars were suppressed, their techniques were absorbed by Venetian and Florentine merchant oligarchies, sometimes called the Black Nobility in later accounts of elite continuity. Whether every later claim holds or not, the pattern is plain. Financial networks often outlast political hosts. The Medici rose as God's bankers, producing popes and refining bills of exchange to disguise interest. The Fuggers bankrolled Habsburg emperors, purchasing influence over thrones while operating under church sanction. Şevket Pamuk's A Monetary History of the Ottoman Empire shows the identical dynamic under the sultans. Debasements justified by imperial theology, while the financial layer extracted real wealth. This shaped whether an artisan could pass a stable trade to his sons, or watched decades of labor dissolve in debased coin and hidden fees. The pattern reached new scale in the Russian Empire before 1917. As Hassan Malik documents in Bankers and the Bolsheviks, international financiers from London, Paris, and New York poured vast capital into Tsarist Russia, financing railways, factories, and loans on an enormous scale. They bet on an autocracy that drew theological legitimacy from the Orthodox Church and the Tsar as God's anointed. When the Bolshevik Revolution came, the new regime repudiated the debts in one of history's largest sovereign defaults. The financiers suffered massive losses on paper claims. Yet the shadow layer did not disappear. It repositioned. A new secular theology, scientific socialism, and revolutionary necessity justified breaking the old covenants. Ordinary Russians paid with hunger, civil war, and lost inheritances. The lesson is clear. Shadow systems survive collapse by attaching themselves to the next sacred story. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, the model was perfected in the West. The Bank of England, founded in 1694 as a private institution, lending to the state, fused fractional reserve banking with the Protestant ethic that Max Weber later identified as the spirit of modern capitalism. Discipline, frugality, and reinvestment became signs of moral election. Losses were socialized while the visible host supplied the navy and the flag. Certain families and networks have shown almost uncanny continuity across these shifting hosts. Venetian oligarchies endured for centuries. The Rothschild dynasty, emerging in the late 18th century, placed sons across Europe to build a private information and capital web that financed states and empires while preserving family control for generations. This is documented financial history. How do certain networks preserve continuity while states and currencies break around them? Today, the mechanism is the US dollar orchestrated through the Bank for International Settlements, the IMF, World Bank, and the global network of central banks. The system presents itself as neutral technocracy, yet it carries its own secular theology. Expert consensus, historical inevitability, risk management, and macroeconomic stabilization. The Epstein files released by the US Department of Justice from 2024 onward offer a glimpse of the modern bridging role. Far from the story of one isolated figure, the documents reveal networks of access, introductions, finance, intelligence, and compromise at the intersection of elite power. They echo the same function once performed by Templar letters of credit, Medici papal connections, Venetian intelligence webs, Fugger imperial loans, and Rothschild information networks. This parasite-host dynamic, sustained and sanctified by theology, whether sacred or secular, is the recurring signature at the end of every long-term debt cycle and every empire. Every empire in its hour of success repeats the same arc. Success breeds hubris. Hubris breeds excess. Excess breeds fragility. The three pillars began to rot from within. Pax Americana ignored the rules-based order it created, launching discretionary wars without broad consensus. Science hardened into orthodoxy, prioritizing funding and narrative control over genuine inquiry. The dollar became a license for endless credit expansion, asset bubbles, corruption, and extreme inequality. This was not the end of history, it was the late stage of a cycle. Financial collapses are rarely simple accidents. They are shaped by decisions, incentives, and timing. In 2008, fragility in the housing system was allowed to balloon. When it broke, certain actors profited enormously. John Paulson made roughly $20 billion, positioning against the market, while large institutions consolidated power at fire sale prices. The BIS coordinated liquidity shifts, first toward China, now signaling elsewhere. This is pattern recognition, not conspiracy. We are watching the end of the unipolar moment in real time. Disruption in the Strait of Hormuz drives up energy and fertilizer prices that hit your grocery bill and heating costs. Germany's registration of military-age males living abroad signals deeper mobilization risks that could touch families and communities. Debt levels strain policy flexibility. Supply chains tighten. These are not random events, they are structural. Symptoms of the parasite detaching from a weakening host and repositioning for the next cycle. From here, history shows two broad paths. Path 1, something breaks. Demand collapses, assets fall, credit contracts. The system responds with massive monetary expansion, but into a world already constrained by energy, food, and production limits. Deflation flips to inflation. Path 2, nothing is allowed to break. Debt is monetized in real time. The system is stabilized in appearance, but weakened underneath. Inflation develops more gradually. The pain is slower but deeper. Both paths end in monetary debasement. The difference is timing and who captures the remaining real assets. When trust finally shatters, people have always turned to monetary metals, gold and silver, not as speculation, but as protection, as lifeboats against the collapse of sacred illusions. This matters to your daily life because holding those lifeboats has repeatedly allowed ordinary families to preserve real purchasing power when paper promises failed. When empires fracture, the societies and individuals that survive are those that shift from efficiency to resilience, from hollow materialism to authentic spirituality and renewed meaning, from radical individualism to the strength of family and local community, from gerontocracy and entrenched power to younger leadership capable of decisive action. Peter Brown's The World of Late Antiquity and Rodney Stark's The Rise of Christianity show how the late Roman world made exactly this turn, allowing fragments of civilization and ordinary families to endure. The same resilience pattern appears in China's dynastic transitions and across the cycles studied by Braudel, Ferguson, von Glahn, Malik, Glubb, and Dalio. Every empire believes it is different. Every cycle feels unique on the surface. But the underlying pattern does not change. This is not prediction. This is pattern recognition. Seeing it frees you from the daily disorientation of headlines. It lets you stop mistaking shadows for reality. It gives you the clarity to protect your family's wealth, strengthen your community, recover meaning, and prepare your children for what history has repeatedly shown comes next. If the current system is the Titanic, the only question that ultimately matters to your life is, where are the lifeboats? Welcome to the sovereign cycle.